I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the newsroom here at NewsX World. Now, of course, it's been a hugely interesting day here in the newsroom, but of course we started the day off with some news coming out of the state of Minneapolis, and a 37-year-old woman named Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed during a federal raid by an ICE agent in the city, 6 blocks down from where George Floyd, that infamous case in 2020, was also killed by federal police. Now, local authorities have said that, have questioned ICE and their movements here when it came to this case. Witnesses have said that this woman was shot in the head unprovoked by an ICE agent who have been deployed onto the streets of Minneapolis. Now, of course, this is widely disputed, with both the President of the United States and the House Speaker saying that the agent was working in self-defense. A video viral on social media has indeed been circulating, and it's become quite a divisive topic. Of course, this comes as Donald Trump commences his immigration crackdown throughout the United States. Minneapolis in Minnesota just being the latest of one of those Democratic-run cities that he has, in which ICE have descended on, these masked agents that deport, who arrest people on the streets when they're going to school and forcibly deport people. Now, in regard to this incident, local authorities have had something to say about it. The mayor, Jacob Frey, publicly condemned ICE's actions here, telling the organization to get out of the city, and that this was a public assault on the... and now we're joined by Rema Hans. She is going to give us a little bit more details about this case.
Yes, Thomas, as you rightly mentioned, that this comes at a time when tensions are soaring in the United States because Trump's administration, they are carrying out one of the biggest, largest ever immigration crackdown in the region. And of course, the incident in Minneapolis has left the entire country in shock. Before I give you more details into this, a larger picture into the immigration crackdown, I would like to put some light on who was Renee Nicole Good, who was shot dead earlier today. The woman has been identified as Renee Nicole Good, who is a mother to 3 people, 3 children, and is a US citizen. In fact, Good was originally from Colorado Springs, and interesting to mention, and she had just moved to Minneapolis just last year from Kansas City. Good was working in Minneapolis as a legal observer of immigration and customs enforcement activities, and several state leaders have said that Good was at the scene of the ICE raid, the south of Minneapolis, only as a legal observer, and their aim was to help maintain calm and deter misconduct and ensure legal rights are respected while the raid is carried out in the region. Now, the Trump administration has outrightly said that this was in fact a domestic terrorist, and in response to this, the mother of the deceased, Renee Nicole Good, the mother has said that during the encounter or the confrontation, Nicole must have been rather terrified, and she was not part of anything that involved challenging the ICE agents. The FBI and the Minnesota Department of the Public Safety are now leading investigations into the shooting. Now, I would also like to mention the incident has drawn 3 popular responses. One is, of course, from President Donald Trump and Secretary Norm. They have characterized the event as an act of domestic terrorism by professional agitators and the radical left. However, the Governor Tim Walz has described the shooting as nothing but totally predictable and avoidable, blaming the administration's recent surge of 2,000 federal agents into the city for creating a dangerous environment. And a very anticipated response is, of course, the people of Minneapolis. There are massive demonstrations and protests that are taking place as we speak. Hundreds have gathered, throwing snowballs at police vehicles and clashing verbally with ICE agents. This has definitely created a near to war zone atmosphere in the region. Now, why is ICE in such a large number? In like 2,000 federal agents are in Minneapolis. As per the Trump administration, this is a major crackdown on Somali American community. The Trump administration has constantly raised the issue that the operation has focused heavily on the people who are accused of being involved in mass fraud in the region. However, the Trump administration has also failed to provide any evidence into this. Secondly, they are targeting alleged criminal aliens in the region, and the DHS have claimed that they have already made over 1,000 arrests of individuals they characterize as murderers and rapists and gang members since the surge began. Now, the question is, the administration has expanded the definition of who is subject to these arrests. New policies are allowing ICE to detain non-citizens with no criminal record if they are encountered during other operations, and to conduct actions near sensitive areas like schools and even churches for that matter. So, of course, in the couple of days, the investigation will reveal further into the Minneapolis incident, and of course, what will be the next steps for the Trump administration, since it has drawn so much criticism from not just United States, but it has raised concerns in different parts of the world as well. Over to you, Tom.
Rema, thank you very much. For our next story, we move on and over to the Caribbean Sea. And of course, there are developing tensions in the Venezuela crisis. The world, of course, is still reeling from the capture of Nicolas Maduro on the 3rd of January, and there has been development since. Of course, sanctions still remain on Venezuela as the Rodriguez government supersedes Maduro's power, with the Trump administration negotiating with Rodriguez. Now Maduro has been in front of a judge in New York, of course, but the huge development over the past 24 hours, the seizure of a Venezuela-linked Russian-flagged oil tanker. The US announced this within the last 12 hours that they'd seized another Venezuela-linked Russian oil tanker. But what makes this one different is this one was flagged with the colors of the Russian Federation, entitled and named the Marinara. It was linked to Venezuelan oil shipments after a prolonged chase in the Atlantic. The operation is part of this broader enforcement against oil vessels evading sanctions tied to Venezuela. In terms of reactions, Russia, of course, has been outspoken about the seizure of the oil tanker. It condemned it as illegal and labeled it as piracy, insisting force against a foreign-flagged civilian vessel in international waters violates maritime law. Now, we have seen, of course, some warming, could say some warning, between the Russians and the Americans during the Trump 2.0 administration, especially in terms of negotiations to end the Russia-Ukraine war. However, there are fears from the Russians that incidents like these may sour those relations, those small bridges which seem to have been built between Moscow and Washington. And now joining me is Rema Han. She's going to tell us a bit more about what happened.
Yes, Tom, this is a clear indication and a rather very strategic move by the United States. In the past couple of days, as we have seen, United States is trying to call monopoly over oil and to ensure that they control the power and trying to lead the energy sector by these seizures. Now, I would like to start by mentioning what is United States idea of calling shots on these tankers, and this comes amid the Western sanctions, of course. Washington is challenging the legal shield that Moscow allegedly provides to illicit tankers, signaling that such flag hopping will be treated as a sign of stateless vessel subject to interdiction. Now, about Marinara, it is part of the global dark fleet that the United States are constantly increasing their crackdown on and used to bypass Western sanctions. Now, officials estimate that these vessels transport over 70% of Russia's oil exports. The US also seized a second tanker, Sophia, as you mentioned, in a back-to-back operation in the Caribbean Sea on the same day. Reports also suggest that during this seizure there was presence of Russian submarine and naval assets dispatched by Moscow to protect the vessel. Although while they were nearby during the seizure, there are no reports of any direct confrontation by the Russian naval group. Now, following this seizure, which has of course brought up many questions, Russia's response has been pretty straightforward, and they have also pushing towards we could be seeing a legal standoff between the two countries. Russia has officially labeled this as a seizure of 21st century piracy and a gross violation of the 1982 UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. The US argues the ship was stateless due to its fraudulent mid-voyage flag change. However, of course, once there is more investigation and we see the face of the legal battle between the two countries, there will be more revelations. Now, this bold move by the United States can be seen as a hardening of US energy enforcement, while House Press Secretary stated that US is committed to seizing all dark fleet vessels illegally transporting oil. And as you had already mentioned that, recently when the president of Venezuela, who is still in the capture of the United States, this is an attempt to further squeezing the oil-dependent regime of the world. Attorney General Bonde has stated that the ship crew is now they will be undergoing a complete investigation and may be brought to the United States to face even criminal prosecution for failing to comply with United States Coast Guard orders and violating federal sanctions of law. Over to you, Tom.
Rema, thank you very much for that input. We move on now and back over to the United States, and the Trump administration has just announced that Donald Trump, is pushing for a massive increase in US military spending for the fiscal 2027 year, proposing about $1.5 trillion, up roughly 50% from the current $900 billion package. Trump has framed the budget bump as necessary for troubled and dangerous times and to build a so-called dream military. Now, there has been a plethora of announcements when it comes from Donald Trump when it comes to the Ministry of Defense, the now named Department of War, including a new Navy, among others, the Golden Dome, another Trump project that's been announced with big placards in the Oval Office. The market reaction has been significant to this, and global defense stocks rose on the prospect of higher US military budgets. Now, we'll have a look at stocks, US military stocks such as Lockheed Martin, among others, which will seem to be benefiting from this over the next year or so. And proposals also faces pushback from analysts and those from think tanks who say that this is going to increase the US national debt significantly. Donald Trump, however, says that tariffs will pay for this new defense spending. Of course, that is widely disputed. Joining us now is Maresha Barb, and she is going to fill us in a bit more about what's going on here.
Yes, well, Tom, like you very rightly mentioned, firstly, what a significant step on the US's administration, on Trump's administration, to incorporate a defense funding as large as this. Now, global defense stocks rose today after Trump called for a larger US military spending, like you rightly mentioned. Now, Trump proposed almost $1.5 trillion for the 2027 defense budget. Now, this is a significant amount. In fact, it's rather one of the highest defense budget spendings that the US has seen in itself. This was taken up from around $901 billion, that is the budget for this year. Now, many analysts and experts say, and we as viewers of this event are also observing it to be an effect or has been influenced by geopolitics, by rising stocks on rare earth minerals as such. All of these factors do play a role, geopolitics and stocks and a lot of rare earth minerals. Now, let's talk about the nitty-gritties about the defense budget. Now, it is the US defense budget is the largest portion of the country's discretionary spending and funds almost 6 branches of the US military forces. The departments that are funded by this are the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, and Space Forces. Now, the budget does not only help in funding these, but they also do pay for salaries, they pay for training, they pay for healthcare, equipment, operations, and development of new weaponry. Essentially, it sustains the military's operational and technological capabilities and requirements. When you look at it for the in context, the budget has definitely been increased, and like you mentioned, this Trump says he will be covering through the tariffs that have been imposed on other nations. Now, markets have reacted rather very quickly. US defense stocks rose as investors anticipated increased government spending, while international defense companies also saw gains. The funding is an ambitious plan, and it is also rather a major point of debate in itself. While Trump proposes to finance it through revenue generated from tariffs imposed on countries, he also argues that the tariffs produce tremendous numbers that make such a spending feasible in itself. Now, like you mentioned, the national deficit, many also argue with regards to the national deficit, and the committee has also said the approval of this defense budget is also underway, and the Congress is another hurdle for this. So yes, Tom, this is all we know about the defense budget and how it's being influenced by geopolitics and the rising stocks, which Trump claims that he will cover up with tariffs in play.
Maresha, thank you very much. Do stay with us once again. Of course, now we move over to West Asia for our next story, and we move to Syria, to Aleppo, in fact, where violence has escalated in Aleppo between the Syrian government and the Kurdish-led democratic forces. Battles there have displaced tens of thousands of civilians, with shelling and clashes reported in multiple neighborhoods. Now, of course, it has been over a year since Bashar al-Assad has been toppled from power. December marked 1 year exactly, and we can still see that Syria is seriously struggling with violence and hostility, particularly in those Alawite-led regions. The fighting, of course, is undermining fragile post-civil war integration between Damascus and US-backed Kurdish forces and has halted previous political agreements. Turkey has signaled willingness to assist the Syrian government against the Kurdish forces. We actually had a statement today from Ankara saying that Turkey was willing to put boots on the ground when it came to this if Syria did indeed ask it to do so. Of course, you can't undermine the humanitarian impact here, where hundreds and thousands of people have been displaced in large numbers. These corridors have opened amid these curfews and operations in Syria. So Syria still showing that very much, even though it has made these huge gains on the Western diplomatic stage, it has a very long way to go on the ground. Okay, joining us now once again is Mireh Shabab. She's going to tell us a bit more about what's been going on in Syria today.
Well, yes, indeed a dire situation in Syria. Syria once again faces one of its most impactful and largest humanitarian crisis ever. Let's talk about the groundbreaking facts with regards to the conflict in Syria. Now, the Syrian army has launched concentrated artillery strikes in Sheikh Maqsood and areas located next to it. Now, they have been fighting the Kurdish-led SDF, and this fighting continues in its third day. Now, like you mentioned, humanitarian crisis has definitely increased. Around 1,38,000 people have been displaced. Many of them were taking shelter and still are taking shelter in mosques and schools. The casualties, unfortunately, that are being reported is at least 8 civilians by SDF claims, 5 by government figures, and dozens were injured in the last 3 days of strikes, although the impact is in tens and thousands. Now, let's talk about what SDF says. SDF denies posing military threat in the areas targeted. It accuses Syrian army of continuing bombardment, holding civilians at risk. There have been calls for immediate halt of siege and attack. There are warnings of escalation that may turn this into a broader conflict. Let's look at it from the government's point of view as well. The Syrian authorities argue that the strikes are part of a targeted operation to enforce the March agreement that was signed, integrating the SDF into state institutions. Air, artillery, and tank strikes focus on neighborhoods declared as SDF positions. Now, you did touch upon the humanitarian impact of it, but let's look at more details. The large-scale displacement with over 1 lakh people is still there and is increasing in affected areas. Hospitals, ambulances, and the University of Aleppo have been hit, and the emergency response to it has been rather very limited. Now, the UN calls for restraint and urgent negotiations to protect civilian lives. It's important to look at the broader context of it, where fighting is escalating after US-mediated talks this week was stalled and no integration was rather implemented. So, yes, Tom, when you look at it from the purview of it, these are failed plans, these are talks that have been stalled, these are agreements that were made but were not followed through, which are leading to the situation in Syria. And we do hope for aid, and we do hope that the violence stops and civilian lives are protected at all costs. Yes, over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the program, and thank you for the input. And we finish this hour with some news coming out of the United States diplomatic circle, and it seems that Donald Trump's rhetoric on Colombian President Gustavo Petro has changed. We saw, just following the operation which captured President Nicolas Maduro, a quite aggressive press conference by the US president. He had previously accused Colombian President Petro, of enabling cocaine exports and made aggressive comments about a possible US invasion to those cameras on Air Force One. We now see that the US president has had a change of heart, and after days of heated rhetoric in which Trump threatened potential military action against Colombia over drug trafficking issues, the US and Colombian leaders have agreed to arrange a White House meeting very soon. Both sides described the recent phone call that Petro and Trump had, despite earlier tensions, signaling a reset in the dialogue in the Western Hemisphere. Well, that's all that we've got time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.